Briar had learned a long time ago that kindness always came with a price. Her former pack had taught her that. They had called her weak because she was an Omega. They had called her useless because her wolf was small, and her family had no influence. And when the pack discovered that she had no powerful relatives to protect her, they stopped pretending she belonged among them. The final humiliation came on a rainy evening. Her alpha had stood before the entire pack and declared that she was no longer welcome. No explanation, no mercy, just a cold command: leave. Briar had walked into the forest with nothing but the clothes on her back. She had no destination, no money, no family waiting for her. By midnight, she could barely walk. Rain soaked through her clothes. Her injured ankle throbbed with every step, and the wound across her shoulder burned beneath the cold water. She collapsed beside a tree. For the first time, Briar wondered if she would simply die there. Then she heard wolves, several sets of footsteps. Her heart stopped. She tried to stand, but her injured leg gave way. Figures emerged between the trees. Men, wolves from another territory. Briar immediately lowered her head. "Please," she whispered, "I'm not looking for trouble." One of the men stepped forward. He wore black, and unlike the others, he didn't carry himself like a guard. The wolves around him lowered their heads. Briar's breath caught. An alpha. He looked at her for several seconds. Then his eyes settled on the blood running down her arm. "Who did this to you?" Briar shook her head. "No one." His expression hardened. "That's not what I asked." She didn't answer. The alpha crouched in front of her. "I'm Vale." Briar stared at him. She knew that name. Everyone did. Vale was the young alpha of the Blackridge territory. Powerful, wealthy, untouchable. And he was looking at her as though she were something worth saving. "Can you walk?" he asked. Briar tried. She took one step, then nearly fell. Vale caught her before she hit the ground. His arm wrapped around her waist. Briar froze. Nobody had held her gently in a very long time. "You're coming with me," he said. "I can't. You can barely stand. I don't belong in your territory." Vale looked at her. "Tonight, you belong somewhere safe." And before Briar could argue, he lifted her into his arms. The palace was nothing like Briar had ever seen. She had never slept beneath silk sheets, never eaten from golden plates, never had servants waiting outside her door, and she certainly had never imagined that an alpha would personally sit beside her bed while a healer treated her wounds. Yet Vale stayed. When the healer finished, Briar looked at him nervously. "You don't have to do this." Vale leaned back in his chair. "I know." "Then why are you—" He studied her. "Because someone should have." Those 4 words nearly broke her. Briar looked away before he could see the tears forming in her eyes. Vale noticed anyway. "Don't cry." "I'm not. You are." She laughed weakly. "I've had a difficult day." "I know." His voice softened. "You don't have to be strong tonight." Briar looked at him. For the first time in months, she felt safe. Maybe for the first time in her entire life. Vale stood. "Get some rest." He reached the door, then stopped. Without turning around, he said, "As long as you're with me, no one will ever hurt you again." Briar's heart skipped. She didn't know it yet, but those words would become the most painful promise she had ever heard. Days became weeks. Briar recovered. Vale continued to visit her. Sometimes he brought food himself. Sometimes he took her outside the palace gardens. Once, when she complained that she had never seen the northern mountains, he ordered a carriage prepared just so she could see them. Little things, small things, but to Briar they meant everything. She began waiting for his footsteps in the hallway. She began smiling whenever he entered the room, and eventually, she realized something terrifying. She had fallen in love with him. She tried to hide it, but Vale seemed to notice. One evening, they stood together on the palace balcony. The moonlight rested over the kingdom below. Briar looked over the railing. "It's beautiful." Vale stood beside her. "It is." She smiled. "You weren't looking at the kingdom." He turned toward her. "No." Their eyes met. For one breath, neither of them moved. Then Vale reached up and brushed a strand of hair away from her face. Briar's heart raced. "I don't know what I would have done without you," she whispered. Vale smiled. "You won't have to find out." She looked at him. "What does that mean?" He didn't answer. He simply took her hand. And Briar let herself believe. She let herself imagine a future. Maybe she had finally found a home. Maybe she had finally found someone who would choose her. Maybe she was loved. 3 weeks later, everything changed. It began with a summons. Vale's father wanted to see him. Sterling rarely summoned his son without reason. Vale entered his father's study. Sterling stood beside the enormous windows overlooking the kingdom. "You've been wasting enough time," he said. Vale frowned. "With what?" "That Omega." Vale's expression changed. "Her name is Briar." Sterling turned. "I don't care what her name is." Silence. Then Sterling walked toward his desk and placed a sealed document on it. Vale looked down. "What is that?" "Your future." He broke the seal. His eyes moved across the page, then stopped. His father watched him carefully. "The Wolf Queen is of age," Sterling said. "Her kingdom controls the northern territories. Their armies are unmatched, and their resources are greater than ours." Vale said nothing. "Marry her," Sterling continued, "and our kingdoms become one." Vale's fingers tightened around the document. "And if I refuse?" Sterling laughed. "You won't." Vale looked up. His father stepped closer. "Think about what this means. More territory, more soldiers, more wealth, more influence. A kingdom twice the size of his own, and a crown that would make every alpha in the region answer to him." Vale stared at the document, then slowly smiled. "When is the wedding?" Sterling's eyes gleamed. 6 weeks. Vale nodded. "I'll marry her." Outside the study, Briar stood completely still. She hadn't meant to listen. She had only come because she wanted to surprise Vale. She had been holding a small gift behind her back. Something she had spent hours making. She had wanted to tell him she loved him, but then she heard his voice through the door. "I'll marry her." Her fingers tightened around the gift. The world seemed to tilt. She waited. Surely there was an explanation. Surely Vale would mention her. Surely he would say something about the woman he had promised would always be safe with him. Instead, she heard Sterling speak again. "And what will you do with the Omega?" Briar stopped breathing. There was a pause. Then Vale answered, calmly, almost casually, "I'll deal with her tomorrow." The little gift slipped from Briar's fingers. It hit the floor. She stared at it. Then at the closed door. Her heart was breaking so quietly that nobody inside heard it. She had thought Vale was planning their future. She had thought every gentle touch meant something. Every meal, every smile, every promise. She had believed she was finally the woman someone had chosen. But the man she loved had already chosen someone else. A wolf queen, a woman with a crown, a woman worthy of him. And Briar, she was just the Omega he needed to deal with. She slowly bent down and picked up the gift. Her hands were trembling. She wiped her tears. Then she heard Vale laugh inside the room. Briar closed her eyes. Something inside her finally went silent. She turned away from the door and walked down the hallway without making a sound. She didn't know where she would go. She didn't know what she would do. But one thing had become painfully clear. Vale had chosen his future. Briar barely sleeps after overhearing Vale and Sterling. By morning, she's still holding on to one desperate thought. Maybe she misunderstood. Maybe Vale meant he would deal with the situation because he had to marry the Wolf Queen. Maybe he would explain everything. Maybe he would tell her he loved her but couldn't betray his kingdom. So she goes to find him. She waits outside his study until he finally comes out. "Vale," he stops. She studies his face, desperately searching for the man who used to sit beside her bed. "Is it true?" He doesn't answer. "The marriage," she whispers. "You're really marrying the Wolf Queen?" Vale simply says, "Yes." Her heart sinks. "But what about us?" And that's when his expression changes. No tenderness, no hesitation, nothing. He looks at her, almost like she's an inconvenience. "What about us?" Briar's voice trembles. "You told me you loved me." Vale laughs. Not loudly, just enough to hurt. "I said a lot of things." She stares at him. "You held me. I was being kind. You told me no one would ever hurt me again. I was comforting you. You kissed me." His eyes harden. "And apparently you mistook that for love." That line should destroy her. Briar takes a step backward. "So, all of it was a lie?" Vale looks directly into her eyes. "I never loved you, Briar." Silence. Then he delivers the cruelest part. He tells her she was simply a broken Omega he felt sorry for. He tells her she had nowhere to go. No family, no title, no money, no pack. And he allowed her into his palace because he pitied her. Briar's eyes fill with tears. Please stop. Vale doesn't. You should be grateful. She shakes her head. Please. You slept in a palace because I allowed it. Her voice breaks. I thought you cared about me. I did. A pause. Like someone cares about a stray they found in the rain. Then the door behind him opens. Sterling steps out. Several nobles are with him. They have clearly heard everything. Briar immediately lowers her head, humiliated. One of the nobles laughs. Another whispers, she actually thought the alpha would marry her? Someone else calls her a stray. The word spreads. Stray, stray, stray. Vale doesn't stop them. Instead, he turns toward the nobles and announces, tomorrow, the entire kingdom will learn that I am marrying the Wolf Queen. Then his eyes settle on Briar. And you will not be there. Briar's tears finally fall. She looks at the man she loved, the man who carried her through the forest, the man who promised she would always be safe. For a moment, it seems as though she's going to beg, but she doesn't. She wipes her face, takes one slow breath, and says, Don't worry, Vale. Everyone becomes quiet. Briar looks directly into his eyes. I won't be there. Then she turns around and walks away. No begging, no pleading, no looking back. Vale watches her disappear down the corridor. Something about her departure unsettles him, because this is the first time Briar has ever walked away from him, without asking him to come after her. And what Vale doesn't know is that she isn't walking toward another man. She isn't returning to her old pack. She isn't going to beg anyone for shelter. She's going home, and to a father who has been waiting years for his daughter to come home. Briar doesn't look back. Not once. She walks out of the palace with nothing but a small bag and the clothes she is wearing. The guards at the gate barely notice her leaving. To them, she's nobody. Just the abandoned Omega. And somehow, that hurts more than being insulted. For the first few miles, Briar walks in silence. Then she reaches the forest. The moment she's alone, she stops. Her knees give way. She falls against a tree and finally lets herself cry. Not because Vale rejected her, but because she had believed him. Every promise, every touch, every moment she'd thought was real. She presses a hand against her chest. I loved you. The words disappear into the trees. Then she wipes her tears and keeps walking. Back at the palace, Vale has already forgotten her. Or so he tells himself. His wedding preparations begin immediately. The entire palace is transformed. Tailors arrive, jewelers arrive, messengers ride between kingdoms. Architects begin decorating the Great Hall. The Royal Council meets every morning, and Vale is happier than anyone has ever seen him. Not because he's in love, because he's about to become powerful. He studies maps late into the night. The Wolf Kingdom's territory will become accessible to him. Their army will stand behind his throne. Their wealth will flow into his kingdom. Their trade routes will belong to his crown. And with the Wolf Queen beside him, every neighboring alpha will have to think twice before challenging him. Vale stares at the map. This changes everything. Sterling smiles. It does. Vale places his hand over the northern territories. After the marriage, we'll be unstoppable. Sterling's smile widens. Exactly. Vale leans back. For the first time, he can already see himself ruling more than one kingdom. He doesn't want a marriage. He wants a throne that no one can threaten. That evening, Vale's closest advisor, Rowan, joins him for dinner. Rowan watches him carefully. You seem unusually pleased. Vale laughs. Why wouldn't I be? The wedding? The future. Vale raises his glass. 6 weeks from now, everything changes. Rowan hesitates. And the Omega? Vale's smile doesn't disappear. Instead, he laughs. Briar? Yes. Vale shakes his head. I knew she'd eventually leave. You don't seem concerned. Why should I be? He takes another drink. She has nowhere to go. Rowan looks uncomfortable. Vale continues. Give her a few weeks, maybe a month. And then? Vale's smile becomes almost arrogant. I'll send for her. Rowan raises an eyebrow. After you're married? Of course. What will you offer her? Vale leans back and says the words that will eventually come back to haunt him. A place in my palace. Rowan understands. You mean, my mistress. Vale says it without shame. He actually believes he's being generous. She'll accept. You're certain? Vale laughs. Where else will she go? He looks toward the window. I know, Briar. She'll come crawling back the moment she realizes what she's lost. He pauses, then adds, besides, she should be grateful I want her at all. Rowan says nothing, but something about Vale's confidence unsettles him. Far from Blackridge territory, Briar keeps traveling. Days pass, then weeks. The landscape changes. The roads become wider. The villages become richer. The people become more formally dressed. Eventually, Briar reaches a massive forest, surrounded by enormous silver gates. 2 royal guards stand outside. The moment they see her, they straighten, then kneel. Briar stops. One guard lowers his head. Your Highness. Briar looks around nervously. Get up. Neither guard moves. Please. The second guard finally rises. His eyes are wet. Your father has been waiting for you. Briar's expression changes. She steps through the gates, and suddenly, the world she knew disappears. A magnificent palace rises beyond the trees. White stone, silver towers, thousands of banners, guards lined along the road, servants waiting, wolves bowing as she passes. Briar keeps walking. She isn't smiling. Not yet. At the top of the palace steps stands a powerful man with silver in his hair. The moment he sees her, his entire expression changes. He rushes down the steps. Briar. She stops. For the first time since leaving Vale's palace, she looks like someone's daughter. The man reaches her. His hands tremble as he touches her face. What happened? Briar looks away. He sees the tears she tried to hide. His expression hardens. Who hurt you? Briar whispers. Father. His eyes narrow. What did he do to my daughter? She takes a shaky breath, and then she finally tells him everything. How Vale found her. How he protected her. How she fell in love with him. How he rejected her. How he humiliated her. How he chose another woman for power. Her father listens without interrupting. When she's finished, silence fills the courtyard. Briar looks up at him. He rejected the woman he thought I was. Her father says nothing. Briar wipes the last tear from her cheek. Then something changes in her expression. The heartbreak is still there, but underneath it, something stronger. She looks toward the palace. He's preparing for a wedding. Her father nods. I know. Briar takes a breath. Then let him. Her father studies her. What are you planning? Briar smiles. A small, mysterious smile. I'm going to give him exactly what he thinks he wants. Her father stares at her. Briar turns toward the palace, then whispers. He's never met the woman he's supposed to marry. A pause. Now, I'm going to meet the man he doesn't know I am. Her father looks toward the distant northern kingdom, and for the first time, he smiles too, because his daughter has come home, and the wedding Vale believes will make him the most powerful alpha alive, is about to become the biggest mistake of his life. The palace doors close behind Briar. For the first time in years, she is home, but she doesn't feel like celebrating. She stands before her father's throne, still wearing the simple dress she left Vale's kingdom in. Alden looks at her, not as a wolf king, not as a ruler, as her father. You shouldn't have gone. Briar lowers her eyes. I had to. Why? Because you told me I couldn't choose a husband based on his title. Alden's expression softens. I told you to meet him. I did. And? Briar gives a bitter smile. I met him. Alden waits. Briar finally says, and I met the man behind the crown. Silence. Alden already knows the answer. But he asks anyway. Did he pass? Briar looks at him. No. Alden rises from his throne. He walks toward his daughter. Tell me everything. So she does. She tells him how Vale found her, how he protected her, how he made her believe she mattered, how she slowly fell in love with him. And then she tells him about the wedding. The moment Vale chose power over her. The moment he called her a stray. The moment he told her he never loved her. Alden's jaw tightens, but he doesn't interrupt. When Briar finishes, he turns away. For several seconds, the Wolf King says nothing. Then, I will end the arrangement. Briar looks up. What? You heard me. Alden turns around. The marriage is finished. He walks toward her. You will never return to that kingdom. Briar shakes her head. No. Alden stops. What did you say? I said no. Briar, I want the wedding. Alden stares at her. You want to marry the man who humiliated you? No. Then why? Briar's eyes harden. Because he doesn't know who he's marrying. Alden studies her. For the first time, he realizes something. His daughter isn't asking for permission to return to Vale. She's asking for permission to finish something. The kingdom believes you are still hidden, Alden says. Good. They believe the Wolf Queen has never met Vale. Good. They expect you to arrive for the wedding in 6 weeks. Briar nods. Then that's exactly what I'll do. Alden folds his arms. And what happens when Vale discovers the woman standing beside him is the same Omega he rejected? Briar doesn't answer immediately. Instead, she walks toward the enormous windows overlooking the kingdom. The Wolf Kingdom stretches beneath her. Thousands of wolves. Endless territory. An army powerful enough to crush Vale's kingdom. She remembers Vale telling her she had nothing. No family, no title, no money. She remembers him saying she should be grateful for his pity. Her fingers curl. He wanted a wolf queen. Alden watches her carefully. Briar turns around. So give him one. Alden's expression changes. And then, Briar smiles. But there's nothing soft about it. I'll let him stand at the altar. Why? So he can believe he's won. Alden walks closer. Briar? She looks at him. You aren't planning to marry him. It isn't a question. Briar says nothing. Alden finally understands. His daughter isn't going to that wedding to become Vale's queen. She's going there to make sure he loses everything he thought he was gaining. That night, preparations begin. Royal seamstresses are summoned. Jewelers open the royal vaults. Messengers are sent across the kingdom. The wedding will proceed. But this time, Briar chooses everything. Her dress, her crown, her veil. Even the guards who will accompany her. Yet she orders one thing. No one is allowed to reveal her identity before the ceremony. Alden doesn't understand. You want the entire kingdom to believe you are a stranger. Briar nods. Until the right moment. And when is the right moment? Briar looks at him. When he has nowhere to run. Alden's eyes narrow. What exactly are you planning to do at that wedding? Briar looks past him. Her eyes settle on the Wolf King's throne. The same throne she will one day inherit. Then she looks back at her father. Her voice is quiet. I'm going to give Vale exactly what he asked for. Alden waits. Briar smiles. And then, I'm going to take it away. Alden's expression becomes serious. Briar. She turns toward the window. Far beyond the mountains lies Vale's kingdom. The man she once loved is preparing to marry a woman he has never seen. He thinks he's about to gain a queen. He thinks he's about to gain an army. He thinks he's about to gain an empire. Briar whispers, "Let him dream." Then she walks away. Behind her, Alden remains beside the throne. And for the first time, the king wonders whether the daughter he raised to be a gentle queen is about to become something far more dangerous. The bells began ringing before sunrise. 1, 2, 3. By the 7th bell, the entire kingdom was awake. Blackridge had never seen a celebration like this. Banners covered the streets. Flowers lined the palace gates. Thousands of wolves gathered outside the royal grounds, desperate to witness the moment their Alpha King married the mysterious Wolf Queen. For weeks, there had been only rumors about her. Some said she was breathtaking. Others claimed she possessed a wolf unlike anything anyone had ever seen. Some said her kingdom was so wealthy that its royal vaults had enough gold to feed an army for generations. Vale didn't care what she looked like. He cared about what came with her. An army, territory, gold, influence, power. He stood before the mirror while servants adjusted his ceremonial coat. Today, he would become more than an Alpha King. He would become nearly untouchable. The door opened. Sterling entered. He looked his son over with satisfaction. Today, he said, you become more powerful than any alpha in this region. Vale smiled at his reflection. Not just this region. Sterling raised an eyebrow. Vale turned toward him. Give me 10 years. His smile widened. I'll be the most powerful ruler this continent has ever seen. Sterling laughed. That's my son. Neither of them noticed the servant standing quietly in the corner. Because that servant had heard everything, and she would later remember every word. Outside, the crowd erupted. The Wolf Queen had arrived. Vale stepped onto the palace balcony. The sight below was enormous. Thousands of wolves, nobles, soldiers, foreign officials. Every important family in the kingdom had gathered. They were all waiting to see the woman who would change their kingdom forever. Then the gates opened. A procession entered. Royal guards dressed in silver, horse-drawn carriages, pages carrying the banners of the Wolf Kingdom, and finally, the bride. Vale's breathing slowed. She was dressed in a magnificent white gown that seemed to glow beneath the morning sun. Silver embroidery covered the fabric. Jewels rested around her waist. A long train followed behind her, and over her face was a veil so thick that Vale couldn't see even the shape of her features. He frowned. He had never seen her, not once, but it didn't matter. She was the Wolf Queen, and that was enough. His eyes moved toward the soldiers surrounding her, then the royal banners, then the enormous procession. His smile returned. Everything he'd ever wanted was walking toward him. Briar stepped from the carriage. Her heart was beating hard, not because she was afraid, because she remembered another day, another place, another man. She remembered standing in front of Vale with tears in her eyes. She remembered him telling her, "I never loved you." She remembered him calling her a stray. She remembered walking away alone. Now hundreds of wolves were watching her walk toward the same man. But this time, she wasn't walking toward him as Briar the Omega. She was walking toward him as the woman he had spent his entire life wanting. The Wolf Queen. Her fingers tightened around the flowers in her hands. One of her guards whispered, "Your Majesty." Briar looked at him. Not yet. He bowed his head. "Yes, Your Highness." Briar turned toward the cathedral. The doors opened. The music began. Vale stood at the altar. The entire hall fell silent. Then he saw her. She walked slowly down the aisle. Every step echoed. Vale's eyes never left her. He couldn't see her face, but he didn't care. He looked at the crown hidden beneath her veil, at the royal insignia around her neck, at the soldiers standing behind her, at the power she represented. His heart wasn't beating because he loved her. It was beating because he could already imagine what her kingdom would give him. This is it. This is the moment. After today, no one can challenge me. The bride reached the altar. Vale looked down at her. She lifted her head. For one brief second, he thought there was something familiar about her eyes, but he dismissed the thought. Impossible. Briar had no place here. She had probably already found some miserable village to hide in. Vale leaned closer. His voice was barely audible. Finally, Briar heard him. Beneath her veil, the corner of her mouth almost lifted. "Yes, Vale. Finally." The priest stepped forward. "Alpha King Vale." Vale straightened. "Do you accept the Wolf Queen as your lawful mate?" Vale didn't hesitate. "I do." The crowd erupted in cheers. The priest turned toward the bride. "Your Highness." Silence returned. "Do you accept Alpha King Vale as your lawful mate?" Briar stared at him through the veil. She could hear her heartbeat. She could hear the crowd. She could hear Vale breathing. And then she remembered his voice from weeks ago. "You will not be there." She almost laughed. The priest repeated the question. "Do you accept him?" Vale waited. His expression was confident. He expected one word, 3 letters, a simple answer that would bind their kingdoms together. Briar slowly raised her head and said, "I do not." The entire cathedral went silent. Vale's smile vanished. He stared at her. "What?" The priest froze. Someone in the crowd gasped. Sterling stood abruptly. "What did you say?" Briar didn't answer. Instead, she reached up. Her fingers found the edge of her veil. Vale stepped toward her. "What are you doing?" Briar's hands tightened around the fabric. Vale's heart suddenly began pounding. Something about her posture, her voice, her presence. Something felt terrifyingly familiar. "No," he whispered. Briar slowly began lifting the veil. Vale's eyes widened. "Wait," she continued. "Who are you?" The veil rose higher. Briar looked directly into his eyes. And for the first time that morning, she smiled. Then she pulled the veil away, and Vale saw her face. His entire world stopped. Briar. For several seconds, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The veil lay on the cathedral floor. Briar stood beneath the golden light pouring through the stained glass windows. And Vale stared at her. His mind refused to understand what his eyes were seeing. The woman standing before him couldn't be Briar. It couldn't. Briar was gone. The helpless Omega, the stray, the woman he had thrown out of his palace, the woman he had told had no place beside him. Yet there she stood, wearing the royal wedding gown, a crown resting against her dark hair, her eyes fixed calmly on his. Vale's lips parted. No. Briar said nothing. Vale took one step backward. No. His voice was louder this time. This isn't possible. A whisper spread through the cathedral. Is that the Omega? That's Briar. The Alpha's Omega? The woman he rejected? The whispers multiplied. Vale heard them, but he couldn't look away from her. He remembered her standing outside his study, her tear-filled eyes, her trembling voice. What about us? And he remembered what he'd told her. I never loved you. You were a stray. You should be grateful. His stomach twisted. Briar watched him remember. She didn't smile. Not yet. Then Sterling suddenly stood. His chair crashed against the floor. He stared at Briar as if he'd seen a ghost. Impossible. Briar slowly turned toward him. Good morning, Sterling. His face went white. He knew. He understood before Vale did. He had seen the royal seal on the invitations. He had studied the Wolf Queen's family tree. He knew the name of the heir. He knew the Wolf Queen had been kept hidden from the public for years. But he'd never imagined, never once imagined, that the woman his son had thrown away was standing in front of them. The Wolf Queen, Sterling whispered. Briar looked at him. Yes. The word echoed through the cathedral. Vale's breathing became shallow. He looked at Briar, then at Sterling, then back at Briar. You? He couldn't finish. Briar tilted her head. Something wrong, Vale? He stared at her. You are. Briar waited. Vale's voice came out barely above a whisper. The Wolf Queen. Briar smiled. Now you understand. Before Vale could speak again, the enormous cathedral doors opened. A deep roar rolled through the hall. Everyone turned. Royal guards entered. Not 10, not 20, hundreds. They marched into the cathedral in perfect formation. Their armor bore the silver wolf crest of the Northern Kingdom, the symbol of the Wolf King, the symbol of Briar's family. They stopped. Then, as one, they dropped to their knees. The sound of hundreds of armored bodies hitting the stone floor echoed through the cathedral. Every head bowed. Every voice spoke together. Your Majesty. Vale stared. His knees nearly gave out. The nobles around him began whispering frantically. The Wolf Queen. She's been here the entire time. She was the Omega. Alpha Vale rejected the Wolf Queen? Someone covered their mouth. Another noble whispered, he's finished. Vale heard every word, but one thought consumed him. I rejected her. He remembered the wedding he'd been planning, the alliance, the army, the wealth, the territory, everything he'd dreamed of gaining. He had spent weeks imagining the Wolf Queen walking into his palace. He had never imagined that she'd already been there, sleeping under his roof, eating at his table, trusting him, loving him, and he had thrown her away. Briar turned toward the crowd. The woman who had once stood trembling before Vale was gone. She stood straight now, composed, royal, powerful, but she didn't need to raise her voice. Everyone was already listening. You wanted a Wolf Queen. Her eyes moved slowly toward Vale. She smiled. Here I am. Vale couldn't breathe. Briar stepped closer. He instinctively stepped backward. The movement didn't escape anyone. The mighty Alpha King was retreating from the woman he'd once called a stray. Briar stopped a few feet from him. Why are you afraid? Vale shook his head. I'm not. You are. No. She smiled. You should be. Then Vale remembered. Not the rejection. Not the humiliation. Not even the moment she'd walked away. Something else. A conversation. A few weeks earlier, he had been sitting with Rowan, laughing, talking about Briar. He could still hear his own voice. I'll send for her after the wedding. She'll come back. I'll give her a place in the palace. And then, as my mistress. Vale's blood turned cold. His eyes slowly widened. Briar was watching him. She knew. She had known. The entire time. His mouth opened. Briar, she didn't answer. You heard me. Still nothing. You heard everything I said. Briar's expression finally changed. A faint smile appeared. Not the smile of the woman who loved him. The smile of a queen, who had just watched her enemy walk willingly into a trap. Every word. Vale's heart stopped, and suddenly, the wedding wasn't the thing he feared anymore. Briar was. The cathedral remained silent. Vale stood before Briar, unable to speak. She had just admitted that she heard everything, every word, every cruel plan, every secret he'd spoken when he thought she was gone. Briar turned away from him. Her eyes moved across the crowd. Since everyone is here, she paused. Perhaps we should finish the conversation. Vale's stomach tightened. Briar. She ignored him. You all heard Alpha Vale say that he never loved me. A murmur passed through the crowd. You heard him call me a stray. Another murmur. You heard him say I had no family, no title, and no money. Briar looked directly at Vale. But there is something you haven't heard. Vale's expression changed. Briar, don't. She smiled. After his wedding, she turned toward the nobles. Alpha Vale intended to bring me back. Vale shook his head. That's not true, Briar continued. He planned to give me a place in his palace. Vale's face hardened. Briar, as his mistress. The cathedral erupted. Gasps, whispers, shock. Some nobles stared at Vale in disbelief. Others looked at Briar. Vale stepped forward. She's lying. Briar didn't react. Am I? Yes. You never said it? No. You never told Rowan that I would come crawling back. Vale's eyes flickered. Briar noticed. So you remember. Vale looked toward Rowan. His advisor had gone pale. Rowan. Silence. Tell them. Rowan swallowed. Vale's voice became sharper. Tell them she's lying. Rowan looked at Briar, then at Vale. I'm sorry. Vale's face changed. Rowan lowered his head. You said it. The cathedral exploded with whispers again. Vale stared at him. You would betray me? Rowan's voice was quiet. I won't lie for you. Briar turned toward the servants, standing along the walls. And he wasn't the only one who heard it. Several servants lowered their heads. One stepped forward. I heard Alpha Vale say he would bring her back after the wedding. Another followed. He said she would accept because she had nowhere else to go. A third whispered. He called her desperate. Vale's hands curled into fists. Enough. Briar wasn't finished. She raised one hand. A royal guard stepped forward, carrying a small wooden box. He opened it. Inside were sealed letters. Briar took one. She held it up. These are messages sent by Vale's advisors during the wedding preparations. She looked at Vale. Do you want me to read them? Vale said nothing. Briar didn't need to. Everyone had already understood. She slowly walked toward him. Do you know what hurts the most? Vale stared at her. Not that you rejected me. Her voice softened. It was why. She stopped in front of him. You didn't reject me because you didn't love me. You rejected me because you believed I was beneath you. Vale's jaw tightened. Briar continued. You looked at my clothes, my injuries, my lack of a family, and you decided I wasn't worthy. She looked around the cathedral. That's what I wanted to know. The crowd became completely silent. When my father proposed this marriage, I asked him one question. She looked toward Alden. Would Vale love me if he didn't know I was the Wolf Queen? Alden nodded. He agreed to let me find out. Briar looked back at Vale. So I came to his kingdom disguised as an Omega. She paused. I wanted to know if the man I would marry could love Briar, before he loved the crown. Vale's eyes lowered. And now I know. Briar's voice became cold. You failed. Vale finally found his voice. I didn't know. Briar stared at him. Exactly. You deceived me. No. She shook her head. I simply allowed you to reveal yourself. Vale stepped closer. You manipulated all of this. Briar laughed softly. Did I? She pointed toward the crowd. Did I force you to humiliate me? No. Did I force you to call me a stray? Vale said nothing. Did I force you to plan to make me your mistress? Silence. Did I force you to choose a crown over a woman you claimed to love? Vale couldn't answer. Briar turned toward the crowd. If he had known I was the Wolf Queen that day, she looked back at him. Would he have treated me differently? Vale's silence answered for him. Then Sterling stepped forward. This is enough. Everyone turned. The older Alpha walked toward Briar. You deceived my son. Briar raised an eyebrow. Sterling's voice grew louder. You entered this kingdom under false pretenses. You manipulated my son. You humiliated him before his entire kingdom. Then he looked toward the council. She has forfeited the right to marry my son. A few nobles nodded uncertainly. Sterling turned toward Briar. You will leave this kingdom. Briar stared at him. Then, she smiled. I agree. The room went silent. Sterling blinked. Vale looked confused. You agree? Briar nodded. Yes. She turned toward the royal delegation behind her. Then toward her father. Alden had been silent throughout the entire confrontation, but now Briar walked toward him. She stopped before the Wolf King and lowered her voice. Father. Alden looked at her. I want to invoke the ancient marriage law. The expression on Alden's face changed immediately. The color drained from his eyes. Sterling noticed. What law? Alden didn't answer. Vale looked between them. What is she talking about? Briar slowly turned around. Her eyes settled on Vale. Then she smiled. Not cruelly, almost gently, as though she already knew the answer to a question he hadn't asked yet. The law that protects a royal bride from a groom who publicly rejects her. Vale's face went pale. Briar took one step forward. And the law. She paused. That determines what happens to a kingdom when its future alpha breaks it. Alden closed his eyes for a moment. Because he knew exactly what Briar was about to do. And Vale finally understood. His father's decision to reject her hadn't merely ended a marriage. It may have cost him his crown. The words hung over the cathedral. The ancient marriage law. Vale stared at Briar as though she had just become a stranger. You're bluffing. Briar's expression didn't change. Am I? Sterling stepped forward. There is no reason to invoke an ancient law over a broken engagement. Alden finally spoke. There is. His voice carried through the cathedral. Your son publicly rejected his intended mate. Sterling's face tightened. She deceived him. Alden's eyes hardened. She concealed her identity. Exactly. She did not conceal her identity to marry another man. Alden took a step forward. She concealed it to determine whether your son was worthy of becoming her husband. Silence. And he wasn't. The crowd murmured. Alden continued. Under the ancient bonding law, when a royal heir is publicly humiliated or rejected by her intended mate, before the marriage is completed, she has the right to dissolve the alliance without penalty. Sterling's confidence began to disappear. But that's not all. Briar stepped forward. The law also states that when an alliance has already been publicly accepted by both kingdoms, she looked around. The kingdom responsible for breaking the bond must compensate the other kingdom for the political and military losses caused by the dissolution. Sterling's face went pale. Briar smiled. That means the alliance ends. A murmur swept through the cathedral. And your kingdom pays. Sterling's voice rose. You cannot do this. Briar looked at him. You told me I had forfeited my right to marry your son. A pause. I agree. She turned toward Vale. But you didn't realize what else you were forfeiting. Vale swallowed. What? Protection. His expression changed. The Wolf Kingdom had one of the strongest armies on the continent. Without the alliance, Blackridge would lose access to its military protection. Worse, the neighboring kingdoms would know. Vale's enemies would smell weakness. His father's dream of becoming unstoppable was beginning to collapse before his eyes. Sterling looked toward Alden. You would abandon the alliance over this? Alden answered calmly. No. He looked at Briar. My daughter has already ended it. Vale stepped forward. Briar. She didn't respond. Please. That word alone stunned the room. The Alpha King had never begged anyone. Not in public. Not before his council. Not before his father. And certainly not before an Omega. But now he stood before the woman he had humiliated. I was wrong. Briar looked at him. Vale's voice shook. I was arrogant. She said nothing. I treated you horribly. Still nothing. I shouldn't have said those things. Briar's expression remained unreadable. Vale took another step. I was wrong. Briar finally spoke. No. Vale froze. You aren't sorry you hurt me. His eyes filled with pain. Briar. You're sorry you discovered who I am. The words struck harder than any slap. Vale shook his head. That's not true. Isn't it? She stepped closer. If I were still the Omega you thought I was. She looked directly into his eyes. Would you be standing here? Vale opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Briar nodded. Exactly. Then Vale did something nobody expected. He dropped to his knees. Gasps filled the cathedral. Sterling stared at his son in disbelief. Vale. He ignored him. The Alpha King looked up at Briar. I don't care about the alliance anymore. Briar's eyes narrowed. I want you. A murmur spread through the room. I don't want another queen. He swallowed. I want you. Briar stared down at him. The man who had once told her she wasn't worthy of standing beside him was now kneeling at her feet. Marry me. The cathedral became completely silent. Vale held out his hand. Please. For one brief moment, Briar remembered the man she had once loved. The man who had carried her through the forest. The man who had sat beside her bed. The man who had promised she would always be safe. But that man had never existed. At least not in the way she believed. Briar looked down at his hand. Then back at his face. Stand up. Hope flashed across Vale's eyes. He slowly rose. Briar's voice was quiet. I haven't decided whether you deserve to keep your crown. Vale's smile disappeared. Before anyone could speak, the cathedral doors burst open. A messenger stumbled inside. He was covered in mud. His breathing was ragged. Everyone turned. Your Majesty! Alden straightened. What happened? The messenger looked around the room. His eyes landed on Vale. Then Sterling. His face became terrified. We found something. Sterling stepped forward. Found what? The messenger swallowed. Records? What records? Ancient royal records. The room fell silent. The messenger looked toward Briar, then bowed. Your Majesty. His voice trembled. We've discovered something about Alpha Vale's father. Sterling's face hardened. What are you talking about? The messenger hesitated. We traced the original royal lineage. Vale frowned. And? The messenger looked toward the throne. The throne Sterling's family had occupied for generations. Then he whispered, the throne he's sitting on. Everyone held their breath. The messenger's voice broke. Was never his family's to begin with. Silence. Sterling went completely still. Vale slowly turned toward his father, and for the first time, he saw fear in the old man's eyes. The throne room was silent. No one moved. The messenger stood in the center of the room, still breathing heavily from his journey. Sterling stared at him. What did you say? The messenger swallowed. The royal records prove that your family never inherited this throne. A murmur swept through the room. Sterling's face hardened. Watch your tongue. The messenger flinched, but he didn't retreat. We found the original succession documents in the old royal archives. Alden stepped forward. Bring them here. The messenger handed him a sealed scroll. Alden broke the seal. His eyes moved across the document, then stopped. His expression changed. Briar noticed. Father? Alden looked at her. This is authentic. Sterling's face drained of color. Vale stared at his father. What does it say? Alden slowly lifted his eyes. It says your family took this throne. Vale shook his head. No. Your grandfather did not inherit this kingdom. Alden's voice hardened. He stole it. The room erupted. Nobles began shouting. Guards exchanged confused glances. Sterling finally snapped. Enough. He turned toward the messenger. These documents are forged. Alden held up the royal seal. Then explain this. Sterling went silent. Because the seal belonged to the former royal house, a house that had supposedly disappeared generations ago. Briar stared at Sterling. You lied to your entire kingdom. Sterling's expression became cold. I did what was necessary. Alden's eyes narrowed. Necessary? Sterling laughed bitterly. The old king was weak. He refused to expand. He refused to attack our enemies. He would have allowed this kingdom to become insignificant. So you murdered him. Silence. Sterling didn't answer. He didn't need to. Everyone understood. Vale stood completely still. Briar looked at him. You knew. Vale's eyes snapped toward her. No. You knew something was wrong. I didn't know everything. But you knew. Vale looked away. Briar stepped closer. Didn't you? His silence was answer enough. She remembered his obsession with the crown, his hunger for power, his father's influence. Everything suddenly made sense. How long? Vale whispered. Years. The room became silent. Briar stared at him. You knew your family stole this kingdom. Vale's eyes filled with tears. I was young, but you stayed. He swallowed. I wanted the crown. Briar's expression hardened. So you chose the throne. Vale couldn't answer. Even after you knew where it came from. Nothing. You knew your father was a criminal. Vale's voice broke. I thought I could change things once I became king. Briar shook her head. No. She stepped closer. You thought you could inherit stolen power and call it yours. Vale lowered his head. Then Alden spoke. There is something else you need to know. Briar turned. Alden looked at the old royal seal. Before Sterling's family took this throne, the previous royal house had an alliance with mine. Briar's eyes widened. You knew? Alden nodded. That's why I agreed to the marriage arrangement. Vale looked up. What? Alden looked directly at him. I wasn't only sending my daughter to meet her future husband. He turned toward Briar. I was sending her to discover whether Vale knew the truth. Briar's expression changed. Suddenly, everything clicked. The disguise, the test, the strange secrecy surrounding the marriage, her father's insistence that she meet Vale without revealing her identity. Alden had suspected something. He needed proof, and Briar had given it to him. Alden's voice was quiet. I needed to know whether Vale was merely the son of a criminal. He looked at Vale, or whether he intended to continue the crime. Vale closed his eyes. Briar answered for him. He chose the throne. Alden nodded. Exactly. The royal council began arguing. Some demanded Sterling's arrest. Others demanded Vale's removal. The guards surrounding the throne slowly lowered their weapons. Not toward Briar, toward Sterling. The old king looked around. Don't you dare. No one moved. Sterling's eyes landed on Vale. Do something. Vale looked at his father. For the first time in his life, he didn't obey him. He whispered, I can't. Sterling stared at him. You ungrateful boy. Vale's eyes filled with tears. You taught me that power was everything. A pause. I believed you. Alden turned toward the council. Under the ancient laws of succession, the Wolf Queen has authority to determine the fate of this alliance. He looked at Briar. And because the current alpha knowingly remained complicit in an illegitimate succession, she may strip him of his title. Every eye turned toward Briar. She looked at Vale. He looked broken. Not the arrogant alpha who had stood in front of her and called her worthless. Not the man who had dreamed of conquering kingdoms. Just Vale. A man who had finally realized what his hunger for power had cost him. Briar walked toward him. Step by step, the entire throne room watched. Vale whispered, please. She stopped in front of him. Do you remember what you told me when I had nothing? Vale's lips trembled. Briar continued. You told me I wasn't worthy of standing beside you. A tear rolled down Vale's cheek. I was wrong. Briar reached toward his head. Her fingers touched the crown. Vale closed his eyes. Briar lifted it away. The room erupted in gasps. She held the crown in her hands, then looked at him. For once, her voice was quiet. You were right about one thing. Vale looked up. Briar smiled faintly. You were never worthy of standing beside me. She lowered the crown, and just as she prepared to announce his punishment, the massive doors of the throne room opened. Everyone turned. A man walked inside. He wore no crown, no royal robes, only a dark cloak covered in dust from the road. The guards immediately moved to stop him. Alden raised one hand. Wait. The stranger continued walking. Briar stared at him. Her face changed. She knew him. Not personally, but she knew that face. She had seen it in the old royal portraits, the portraits her father had shown her when she was a child. The last surviving member of the family who once ruled this kingdom, the rightful heir. He stopped several feet from Briar. His eyes moved to Vale, then to the crown in her hands. He shook his head. Briar. She stared at him. Who are you? He looked toward the throne, then back at her. His voice was calm. I'm not here for the throne. Vale looked confused. The stranger's eyes hardened. He pointed toward Sterling. I'm here because I know who really ordered my family's murder. The entire room went silent. Then he looked directly at Vale and said, and your father isn't the only one who should be afraid. The throne room erupted. The stranger's words hung in the air. I know who really ordered my family's murder. Sterling went completely still. Briar slowly turned toward him. Is that true? Sterling said nothing. The stranger stepped forward. My family didn't disappear. His eyes burned with hatred. They were murdered. The room fell silent. And the order came from Sterling. Gasps exploded throughout the hall. Sterling finally lost control. Liar! The stranger reached inside his cloak. He pulled out a small metal pendant, an ancient royal insignia. My father gave me this, the night he sent me into hiding. He held it up. He told me that if anything happened to him, I was never to return until I had proof. Alden stepped closer. He examined the insignia, then nodded. It's genuine. Sterling's face collapsed. The stranger continued. Your family didn't simply steal the throne. He looked at Sterling. You murdered everyone who stood between you and it. Briar looked toward Vale. He was crying now. Not because he'd lost his crown, because he finally understood the truth about the man he had spent his entire life trying to impress. His father had built everything on blood, and Vale had wanted to inherit it. Sterling suddenly lunged toward the stranger. The guards moved instantly. They seized him before he could take another step. Let me go! No one listened. Sterling looked toward Vale. Son. Vale stared at him. Sterling shouted, You are my heir. Vale's eyes were empty. Not anymore. The words stunned everyone. Vale turned away. 2 guards approached him. One reached for his crown. Vale removed it himself. He placed it into Briar's hands. Their eyes met. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Vale whispered, I really lost everything. Briar looked at the crown. No. She looked back at him. You lost what you thought made you important. The council gathered. The evidence was undeniable. Sterling was arrested for treason, murder, and the unlawful seizure of the throne. The royal succession was declared illegitimate. Vale was stripped of his title. His lands were seized. His wealth was placed under royal control. His political authority disappeared. Within a single day, the man who had believed he was destined to rule half the continent became nothing more than a disgraced former alpha. But there was one thing Briar refused to allow. Vale would not be executed. The council objected. He knew. He was complicit. He wanted the throne. Briar listened. Then she stood. I know. The council became quiet. But I won't kill him. Alden looked at her. Why? Briar looked toward Vale. Because death would be too easy. Vale's eyes lifted. She continued. Let him live. Let him wake every morning knowing he lost everything. Let him watch the kingdom he wanted to rule move forward without him. And let him remember that the woman he called worthless, she paused, was the woman who took his crown. Vale lowered his head. For once, he had nothing to say. Months passed. Blackridge changed. The stolen royal family was formally restored. The rightful heir became king. Sterling was imprisoned, and Briar returned to her own kingdom. On the day of her coronation, thousands gathered. The great hall was filled with nobles from across the continent. The same nobles who had once laughed at the crying Omega. The same people who had called her a stray. Now they stood before her. And when Briar walked toward the throne, every one of them bowed, one by one, until the entire hall was on its knees. Briar stopped before the throne. Alden placed the royal crown upon her head. The hall erupted. Long live Queen Briar. She closed her eyes for a moment. She remembered the girl who had walked into the forest alone. The girl who thought she had nothing. The girl who had believed that being loved by an alpha would finally make her worthy. She opened her eyes. She had never needed his love. She had needed to discover her own worth. And now the entire world knew it. Several months later, Briar received an unexpected visitor. Vale. He stood before her without a crown, without guards, without the expensive clothes he'd once worn. He looked older, smaller, almost like the man she had first met in the forest. Briar looked at him from her throne. Why are you here? Vale swallowed. I wanted to see you. You've seen me. I wanted to say something. Briar waited. He looked at her. I still love you. Silence. Briar studied his face, then asked quietly, Do you love me? Vale nodded. Yes. Briar smiled sadly. No, Vale. He frowned. You don't. She rose from her throne. You love the woman you discovered I was. Vale's eyes filled with tears. You loved the Omega you thought you could save. She stepped past him. And you wanted the queen because of what her crown could give you. She stopped beside him. You never loved me. Vale closed his eyes. Briar walked away. She didn't look back. This time, she didn't need to. That night, Briar sat alone in her chambers. The kingdom was quiet. A servant entered. Your Majesty. Briar looked up. There is a letter. From whom? The servant placed it on the table. Briar saw the seal. Her expression changed. She knew that symbol. It belonged to a kingdom beyond the eastern mountains. A kingdom far older, far wealthier, and far more powerful than Alden's. She broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Only one sentence had been written. Briar read it once. Then again. Her hands slowly began to tremble. Wolf Queen Briar, we know what you really are. She stopped breathing. The candle beside her flickered. Because there was only one problem. Nobody was supposed to know. Not Alden, not Vale, not the council, not even the people who had crowned her. Briar slowly folded the letter. Her face had gone pale. All her life, she had hidden one final secret. A secret that made being a wolf queen seem insignificant. She looked toward the window. Beyond the mountains, something was coming. And for the first time since Vale had broken her heart, Briar was afraid. And just like that, Briar went from the Omega everyone laughed at, to the queen everyone was forced to kneel before. But that final letter. We know what you really are. What do you think Briar has been hiding? And who do you think sent that letter? Was Vale truly in love with Briar? Or did he only love the power he thought she could give him? Tell me your theory in the comments. I want to know what you think Briar's final secret is. And if you enjoyed watching Vale lose everything after treating Briar like she was worthless, don't leave yet. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on your notification bell so you don't miss the next story. And if you want to see what happens when the kingdom that knows Briar's secret finally comes for her, you definitely don't want to miss the next chapter. Until next time, my loves, never underestimate the woman you think has nothing to lose. Because sometimes, the person you humiliate today is the queen you'll have to kneel before tomorrow.